The Arizona Cardinals have just made their third pick of the night, edge Marquise Sanders out of Cincinnati. That comes after shortly drafting defensive end Cameron Thomas out of San Diego State, also in the third round, and tight end Trey McBride out of Colorado State in the second. We're going to analyze those three picks here on Cardinals Draft Central. Thanks so much for joining us alongside Cardinals insiders Paul Calvisi and Craig Grialou. I'm Dani Sureck. We're so glad you're joining us while watching the 2022 NFL Draft on NFL Network. Well, expect the unexpected. That's what we've learned in the last 24 hours. The tight end maybe threw us by surprise, and now we get two edge rushers.
Well, it's obviously, as we discussed earlier here on Cardinals Draft Central, a little bit of a curveball with the tight end, but then what did they do, Dani? They listened to me address outside linebacker, get that edge rusher, get someone who can get after the quarterback, not only with Marquise Sanders, but also with Cameron Thomas out of San Diego State. So, certainly, the number one need has been addressed.
They saw you throw your papers in the air, having to cancel our show last night. So they said, we're going to throw Craig a bone. We're going to get two edge rushers. Paul, Thursday night one, round one of the draft, you had to kind of adjust as well on the fly. You were hosting the draft party out from State Farm Stadium with a ton of Bird City fans. How quickly did your mood change when you found out the Cardinals traded out of the first round? Oh, but wait, that's okay because Marquise Hollywood Brown was on his way being flown up by owner Michael Bidwell to the party.
Yeah, we got our first recorded instances of Hollywood, the fans chanting out there, right? It was literally one of those moments where I'm up on stage, I'm like, wait a minute, they're telling me in my ear there has been a major trade, and everyone went silent because we were watching the draft. You had the Suns game up there as well. Everyone was having a good time, and then when we announced the trade and Hollywood Brown coming to the AZ, everyone went bananas. And then the unbelievable part was they said, guess what? They're also telling me he's going to be here in a couple of minutes. And sure enough, he showed up, and we were up on stage, and the picture that went viral with him and the team owner Michael Bidwell. And so, it was great stuff, and it was illuminating. It really was, to learn about how it's going to be a much better fit, I think, with the Arizona Cardinals in this offense than it ever was with that run-heavy, tight end-dominated offense with the Ravens. They ran a lot of heavy packages. The Cardinals really believe, and Marquise Brown believes, that there is a ton of upside still in his game. And reuniting with Kyler Murray, I mean, he never stopped smiling all of last night, and he was smiling into today's press conference, as you guys saw.
It would have been nice if you had given us a heads up here back in Tempe that something was happening, because we basically were kind of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit here, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, look, he knew, but he wasn't telling anyone, not even Kyler, till the very end. And so when I asked Michael Bidwell how long, he said, well, it was kind of in the works for a couple of days, and then heated up right during when the draft started. But you see why it happened. Those 6 elite receivers went off the board, and the Cardinals said, you know what, we need someone right here, right now, a guy who can be plug and play. And we know the Cardinals' success in going for the proven versus the unproven, the known versus the unknown, and that's what they did in Marquise Hollywood Brown. And I tell you, that speed, I asked him as well. I said, okay, how fast are you? Because you did not run the 40 at the combine because of the foot injury. And he said, I would have made a run at the record. I firmly believe that. We're talking the all-time record, John Ross, 4.22. So in his mind, he is absolutely a sub 4.3 guy. And to think what that's going to do for the Cardinals offense now and open everything up. He didn't have a DeAndre Hopkins in Baltimore. He was the one getting the double coverage. So now you free him of that, and then all the other weapons, and you have the potent run game with James Conner, and now you have 3 legit tight ends to circle back to Trey McBride, Dani. It's going to be real intriguing to see how Cliff Kingsbury, how he goes and he schemes this up. Somebody told me, by the way, that when the trade was official, they said, quote, Cliff's head exploded. Because he recruited Hollywood Brown to come to Texas Tech, just like Kyler Murray once upon a time. And now he gets to dial these guys up.
Let's take a quick look back at the draft party Thursday night. Paul Calvisi, your host, with Hollywood Brown making that appearance.
How about it, everyone? Your very first official look at the newest Arizona Cardinals receiver, Marquise Hollywood Brown, everyone.
Cliff Kingsbury was trying to recruit him back at Texas Tech. Cliff's head exploded this afternoon when he learned about this. He's so fired up.
Marquise Hollywood Brown, the newest Arizona Cardinal in a trade for the Baltimore Ravens.
Let's take a look at the 3 picks from tonight, day 2, rounds 2 and 3 for the Arizona Cardinals. Pick 100, the most recent edge, J. Sanders out of Cincinnati. Craig, you've been calling for edge rushers since the beginning. So now that they've taken 2, Cameron Thomas just before, how much does that push the need down the list for this team addressing that position?
I think you're set right now with respects to the draft. I still would like to see a veteran now in the mix in free agency here ahead of at least training camp to give these 2 young players a little bit time to develop so you're not asking them to do a whole lot. You got 2 very young players that now all of a sudden are in the mix. And it's good because if you remember, Kingsbury back in the combine in Indianapolis said we need to get younger at that position. So you draft 2 young prospects, but can you count on them week 1? That's a lot to ask. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more of some leeway to get those guys kind of get everything under their belts, if you will.
Paul, what is a realistic expectation for somebody like Sanders in terms of what type of immediate depth or relief he can bring early on?
Well, we know the Cardinals usually like to use a rotation on that front, right? And so right now you have Marcus Golden, you have Dennis Gardeck, and then from there, okay, you're going to have to dial something up. Now it's interesting when you look at the 2 picks, like for example, you have J. Sanders, right, and Cincinnati, and they really went with production, I believe. If you look at his numbers, he's one of the national leaders in pressures. And if you look at his entire career, he was a conference defensive player of the year for a Cincinnati team that was ranked in the top 5 seemingly all year long, went to the college football playoff. And so you got a guy who's productive, who proved it, not just a bunch of projected numbers and measurables. And so I think they really banked on that. Now, whether a lot of these guys are every down players, whether they have the size and the strength and the bulk, we'll see how they hold up against the run. You're going to find that out in training camp right away. Can they set the edge? Can they be relied upon in that regard? Or are they more in third down passing situations? We'll see. But this draft class, in terms of edge rushers, was said to be 20 deep. And so, and most of the Cardinals personnel guys talking to them, who are up in that war room right now, believe that. Yes, this is one of the deeper drafts ever in edge rush. And so the way the board fell to him, and they went to tight end in round 2 with Trey McBride because he was, quote, by far the best player on the board at the time. That left round 3 in the pair of picks. And now you see the value in getting that extra pick from Baltimore. You flood the position with a couple of edge rushers, and you see who emerges.
The other edge rusher, defensive end Cameron Thomas out of Colorado State, drafted just a few picks before in the 2nd round. He was the Mountain West Conference Defensive Player of the Year. What did you like about so far and what you've learned about Thomas so far?
It's much like what we heard Paul mention about Sanders. It's the production. According to Pro Football Focus, he ranks 2nd among edge rushers in FBS as far as 77 pressures, 44 run stops, 11.5 sacks last season, 9.5 the previous 2 seasons. So you saw that jump and the improvement, and then you just look at his speed and being able to track down whether it's the quarterback or the ball carrier in the backfield. They talk about the Marcus Golden motor. Cameron Thomas, based off some of the highlights, looks like he has that motor and then the ability to drop back into coverage as well and get the football.
The initial word on Cameron Thomas, he is a nasty dude. He plays with an edge. He's really amped up, not just the motor in terms of the physicality, right, and the energy, but just the attitude he brings into the trenches. He has versatility to rush from multiple spots along that defensive front. If you look at a lot of the scouting reports, he was really a tone setter for that San Diego State defense and considered a sleeper. Now, he didn't see a lot of NFL talent. You play in the Mountain West Conference. So here we're going to see how he fares from the get-go in training camp when he's going against legit NFL offensive linemen. He also might need to put on a little weight. We'll see, just like Zach Allen did after his rookie year. 6'4", 267. Can he play at that weight? Can he be stout against the run, for example? So we'll see. But you got 2 guys as edge rushers who have been there and done that, meaning in the backfield. A lot of tackles for loss, a lot of quarterback pressures. And so the Cardinals base those draft picks on that, the production and what they can actually see on film. Because when you get to round 3, a lot of the measurables are out the window. The flash and the hype, as Drew Grigson told us on the Big Red Rage, that's all gone. And he said that's what he actually likes about round 2, 3, and beyond, is now you're just finding football players, because really what you have to rely on is the film. How can they play? That's what you need to know. And so we'll see, because there's no doubt that is a position in need right now. And I agree with Craig. There's a veteran coming. You have to have a proven edge rusher. And I think a time sign at some point is coming when it comes to an edge.
So you think it's unlikely that the Cardinals are done addressing the edge position?
If there's one spot in free agency where they're still going to sign one between now and camp, it's definitely edge. And it might be two. We'll see. And they're just going to play it and wait for the market to bear out and see who they can get a good deal on. Once upon a time, a John Abraham or a Dwight Freeney. Maybe a late ad, even a proven veteran who doesn't necessarily want to make it all through, doesn't want all the 6 weeks of camp. You know what? I'll come in and I fully expect that.
Thomas was wearing number 99. He mentioned he has modeled his game after defensive lineman J.J. Watt, who currently wears that number for the Cardinals. You think he's going to walk in and ask for that number, Craig?
Probably not if he's smart.
Hard no.
Let's go ahead. We've got the press conference live with General Manager Steve Keim and head coach Cliff Kingsbury after their picks they just made.
His style, the way he plays with his hands, he's really, really a good player. I think he's the kind of guy who could help contribute immediately. J. Sanders is a guy with tremendous upside. He's continued to get better and better at Cincinnati. He's one of the main reasons that college and that university has been improved so much, because they have guys like him, really long, athletic defender, plays hard, runs to the football. The thing that probably impressed me the most is when I watched him against teams like Alabama and Notre Dame. He played his best football and really, really answered the test, especially against guys like Evan Neal and some of the offensive linemen at Notre Dame. So excited about both those prospects.
I like your depth there, then, Steve.
Yeah.
With the other guys you have. And
Love it too, and Bob, I think the one thing about these two, different than from a number of those outside guys, is the length that both of them have. They're both 6'4" plus, really long arms, and again, both of them can run and play hard.
Steve, all three of your picks today were from Group of 5 conferences, and I know a lot of guys come from Group of 5 schools, but did you think those guys were just kind of undervalued sometimes, maybe because of the competition they play?
Yeah, and I think one of the things about the particular players that we drafted, they were complete players. And when I say complete player, we always said, do they play hard, do they play smart, do they play physical? Can you check those boxes, regardless of where you're going to go in the draft, whether you have leadership and all those intangibles? And every one of those guys that we took today are high character, very physical, very tough, intense players. And, again, you can't have enough of those guys in your locker room.
Cliff, a couple of years ago, obviously, when Chandler got hurt, you guys kind of had to piecemeal a pass rush together, and it worked. With what you've got right now and the guys you just added today, are you feeling confident that that's going to work out the way you need it to?
Yeah, I am. I thought that year VJ and the defensive staff did a tremendous job of scheming things up and, coming up with new pressures, different ways to get home, and the sack numbers were still there. So excited about adding these two pieces. I really think it adds depth to that room, and they're both dynamic rushers.
When you say Cam can play inside, you mean a linebacker also?
No, inside on the defensive front.
So you think
Yeah.
he needs to put on some weight there?
Well, he's about 267 pounds, and you see the way he plays, and he's a violent guy inside with his hands, so he can play against bigger tackles, Bob, and hold them off. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a guy that I think can really come in again once he gets through this little ailment with his hamstring. He's set. He's set and ready to go.
What about the production of Cam Thomas that you guys like?
Yeah, I mean, 11.5 sacks, I think, this past year. I think in the COVID year, what was it, like 4? And then his true freshman year, I think it was 6 or 7, something like that. I may be overestimating a little bit. I liked him. And I said, Bob, sorry, Howard. It's been a long day.
Well, Chandler did that last year.
I mean, I should know the #1 draft guy in NFL history. You demand more respect than that. I apologize.
With the early part of the day tomorrow and not having picks, are you still hopeful something moves there, or what are you kind of looking at?
Yeah, depending on how it falls. I mean, we always have some picks next year. We have some compensatory picks next year that we're going to get. We have some ammo, but at the same time, we're going to be smart about it. Obviously, don't want to waste any picks. So if there's somebody that stands out and we know can help us, we'll be aggressive and go get them.
Cliff, MyJ mentioned having conversations with you. What were your sort of impressions of him as a person?
Yeah, I liked him. Loves football. He's authentic, and we had a great dinner when he came to town. And just like Steve said, when you watch him play against the big boys, he stepped up, and they were down, 3 scores against Alabama, and he's still rushing like it's, play one, and that says a lot about his football character. So excited to get him in that room, a guy like Junk that he can learn from and mentor with that type of work ethic and the way he plays. I think it's a great setup for him.
I know that all players are going to talk highly of the team that just took them, but Cameron was talking about being at a Cardinals game at the end of the season and picturing himself out there with you guys. MyJ was saying that, he was gushing that this was the best defense for him to go to. What does it mean to you that they're pretty enthusiastic about this landing spot?
Yeah, and it starts all the way back to, Hollywood yesterday saying it was his dream destination. And anytime you have guys that want to be here, it makes it special. In our interview at the Combine, Cam, he wears 99. He has the mannerisms like JJ. I had to text JJ and apologize to him that potentially we could have a stalker situation on our hands, but him and Zach Allen will be following him around like little puppies, but that's a good thing, because if they're both in here at 6 like him every day and stay till 4, we're good with it. But yeah, you get excited because those are the football junkies. Those are the guys that are vested in what you're doing.
You look at Sanders' production with 62 quarterback pressures. He really stands out.
Well, that's the thing, Mike. When you watched him on tape, I loved how disruptive he was. But then you look back and you say, man, this guy must have like 8 or 9 sacks. He was more disruptive than productive. That's not a knock against him. He affected the quarterback. And sometimes, obviously, that means a lot. And with his length and his ability, and I think where he's going to go at the next level, I think he'll continue to take off.
General Manager Steve Keim and head coach Cliff Kingsbury at the podium, talking about their latest picks. Day 2, defensive end Cameron Thomas and edge MyJ Sanders. Something that stood out to me was length. That was the word Steve Keim used when talking about these edges that the Cardinals just drafted. That's something you lost in Pro Bowler Chandler Jones to free agency with the Raiders. What stood out to you hearing from Keim and Kingsbury behind those selections?
Yeah, the MyJ Sanders is interesting. He doesn't, he's not a guy who's going to come and bull rush you. He's more of a speed rusher, but if he has that athleticism, and then maybe you can add some of the size and strength later, some of that bulk a little bit later, but you can't teach that speed off the edge. And so if he has that, and as he said, he is disruptive. And look, we know with Chandler Jones, there were games where he had 5 sacks, and there were games where he had 0 sacks. But guess what? The opponent had to game plan for him every single snap. And that's what this Cardinals team really needs. That's what they didn't have and why they traded for Chandler Jones once upon a time. You want an offensive coordinator to look at the Cardinals defense and say, we got to take care of that guy. That guy is a threat. Even if it's just in passing situations, 3rd and long, 2nd and long, if MyJ Sanders is a situational guy, for example, he has that ability to come off the edge and be that guy who's going to crash the backfield from the edge, then that is a value. There's no doubt about it. And then in terms of, in terms of what they're going to do now and how they flood that position with other from outside, I think it's coming. There's no doubt. And they will follow J.J. Watt around, as he said. There's no doubt. J.J. Watt will have a following. In addition to Zach Allen, will be the 2 rookies.
After hearing from Keim and Kingsbury behind these selections, how significantly have the Cardinals filled that gap outside?
I think that's still wait to be seen, because again, you can't expect these 2 young players to come in right away and produce. But if they have the right mindset, and then as Kai mentioned, and you always want your edge rushers to finish the play, but just be disruptive, the word that Paul used. Get in the backfield, whether you're wrecking havoc on the quarterback, the ball carrier, whomever it is, but get home or at least knock that quarterback off his spot. Pressures, hurries, knockdowns. Not always the sacks that people follow on the stat sheet, but just disrupt the offensive flow of the game, even for a play or 2. But again, this is going to be a work in progress for both of these players, even though they are day 2 picks. This is in the top 10, top 15 pick as far as an edge rusher is concerned.
And you know what, Danny? They're going to get a rotation going here along that defensive front. You still have young guys in Lecky Fotu and Rashard Lawrence, and there's going to be some competition now in there. And, and a Zach Allen, obviously, you bring these guys in. Vance Joseph likes to keep them fresh. If you can get into that rotation and you can dress on game day, you're going to get into the game. Michael Dogby has made great strides over the last couple of years. So we'll see. We'll see where they start. We'll see where they end up. And when they start getting playing time and they start pushing some of these younger guys, and you know what? They have to figure that out right now, because there's more than one way to get a pass rush and get to the quarterback. And if you can get that interior pass rush and you can crash the pocket from the inside out, and maybe Cameron Thomas is that guy from the inside from San Diego State. He has that ability to play in different spots. We'll see. And at 267, you can be used in situations. I mean, before Chandler Jones came to the Cardinals, Bill Belichick would move him inside all the time. He would be a 3 technique. He would be a 5 technique. And so we'll see what exactly they have in mind. But once they get these guys into camp, they'll see what they're capable of.
The Cardinals used 2 of their 3 draft picks tonight on edge rushers. They used the first one in the second round on tight end Trey McBride out of Colorado State, the first tight end drafted this year. Why does this pick make sense? You're laughing.
I laugh because, like everyone else, we were all brutally wrong. And when we said literally on the air, how many times they say, well, they're not going to draft tight end this year because they got Zach Ertz and Max Williams. Wrong. And he was by far, quote unquote, by far the best player on the board. And then when you zoom out and you look at it, you look at how dynamic he is as a 2-way tight end, as the highest rated tight end in this draft. And you remember how effective the Cardinals offense was when they had Max Williams out there. Why? Because he could catch it or he could block in the run game. And it's not a tell when you substitute. If you bring in just a receiving tight end, well, guess what? Odds are the Cardinals are going to throw the ball. You bring in a Trey McBride just like a Max Williams, it's impossible for the defense to know. Are they going to run it? Are they going to throw it? And that's what he has, unlike any other tight end in this draft. He can block, he can also catch, he is athletic. And he was highly productive at Colorado State. Easily could have transferred and gone into the transfer portal. In fact, he thought about it the COVID year when the Mountain West Conference shut down, but then they ended up playing a delayed season, so he stuck around. He's a Colorado kid. And there's just, you look at some of the numbers and what they talk about. Here's the other thing, and I got a text from someone in the war room. They like his positional flexibility as a tight end, not just the ability to run block and catch the ball, but the fact they can line him up at their traditional tight end spot in line, and they can also put him in the backfield as an H-back. And so it's that ability to scheme him up, and he can be anywhere. Think about it. You add him out there with Max Williams and a Zach Ertz and now a Hollywood Brown and a healthy DeAndre Hopkins along with an A.J. Green and Rondale Moore, and those guys aren't coming off the field, and Cardinals are going, hurry up. That's a lot for a defense to have to account for.
It's a pretty nasty receiving core. Tight end Max Williams suffered a knee injury, an ACL injury this season. How telling is this draft pick maybe of what the Cardinals are expecting from him, or how early they're expecting him to make a recovery, because Max Williams is sitting so far at the second tight end on this roster just behind Zach Ertz.
You would think the injury happened in week 5. Perhaps he's available week 1 of 2022. You don't know. So now all of a sudden you've got a little bit of a backup plan, if you will. Zach Ertz, obviously your number 1 tight end, but maybe Trey McBride can be that number 2 to maintain your top 2 tight end sets and utilize more 2 tight ends. The big point with McBride is also he was the number 1 offensive threat for Colorado State, but he has the perfect mindset coming into the National Football League, telling reporters earlier on Friday, quote, I'm a guy who can be an asset in the run game, can go and put people on their backs and make plays, end quote. Sounds like someone who's willing to do whatever it takes to be on the football field. And again, to Paul's point, is that in the backfield? Is that in the slot? Does he put his hand in the dirt and become a blocker? But you love the size, you love the athleticism, and just how physical he is within this Cardinals offense. I think it's something we haven't seen a lot of, 2 tight ends regularly with Cliff Kingsbury. But when you have 2 tight ends like a Zach Ertz, and if McBride is capable, then all of a sudden it opens up even more with a DeAndre Hopkins on one side, Hollywood Brown on the other. I mean, these tight ends are going to have so much green space in front of them.
And there's no doubt it's a pick for the future as well. Steve Keim told the media as much. I mean, you have Zach Ertz, who's in his early 30s, Max Williams in his late 20s. Okay, those guys are the now. The future is going to be Trey McBride at tight end. And so you have to draft with that in mind. And so that's exactly what the Cardinals did. And if you look at the draft history in the NFL, it's interesting. Only 9 tight ends have been drafted in the first round over the last decade. I mean, some of the best tight ends in the game, Rob Gronkowski and Zach Ertz and Hunter Henry and Dallas Goedert and Mike Gesicki, all these guys were second and third rounders. So you can find a really effective weapon outside of the first round, and I think that's what the Cardinals had in mind when they drafted Trey McBride.
The trade to get rid of the first-round draft pick to the Baltimore Ravens and get Hollywood Brown addressed the Cardinals' need for a wide receiver after losing Christian Kirk to free agency. Now the Cardinals have addressed the edge position with Cameron Thomas and MyJ Sanders. And although tight end wasn't on our list for top needs, they addressed that position as well. Let's take a look at the needs for the Cardinals as they wrap up day 2 of the draft ahead of day 3, the final rounds 4 through 7. We've got 2 things crossed off: Craig, receiver and edge rusher. What's still up there? Cornerback, interior defensive line, and offensive line. I know that edge rusher was screaming your name at the beginning of the day. Now that that's crossed off, what is next for you as priority number 1?
The line of scrimmage. And whether that's offensive line or defensive line, you have to win at the line of scrimmage. And the Cardinals looking towards the future. If Trey McBride is a look at the future, what does this team do in the future at offensive line? Defensive line, you do have some young talent with a Rashard Lawrence and Aleki Fotu, but I don't know if they have developed as quickly as the Cardinals had anticipated, so maybe you get a little more rotation, especially at defensive tackle, someone to really clog the middle and allow the outside rushers to get home, whether that's J.J. Watt, Zach Allen, or, of course, on the outside as far as the linebacker is concerned. So I would think the line of scrimmage, whether that's offense or defense, would be the focal point of day 3.
You're not picky.
I'm not picky.
What about you, Paul?
And you know what? Look, I would put corner at the bottom of that list. There's no doubt. The signing of Jeff Gladney and the Cardinals decision makers are already calling him a starter. So I don't think the need is nearly as glaring at corner as, I agree with Craig, at interior D-line or offensive line. Remember, 4 of the 5 starters right now on the offensive line are going into the last year of their contract. So that's got to be in the back of the mind of the people pulling the trigger in the war room, and whether they can find someone. Now, whether they can find a highly rated talent that maybe suffered an injury. See, now you have the draft capital in rounds 6 and 7, 2 picks in 6, 3 and 7 to do something like that. And you have the quantity in this year's draft because of COVID. Then there's a lot more players, just sheer number of players that have been pushed into this draft. And for that reason, that's why the Cardinals coveted more picks at the back end than normal, because they think there's going to be more talent than ever at the back end. So we'll see what they can discover when it comes to their line of scrimmage.
Did you hear what I heard, Dani? I specifically heard Paul Calvisi say, I agree with Craig.
Wow.
We might
this
have to.
This is just a perfect Friday.
We'll edit that out later. I'm certain on that one.
Paul, you were touching on the 6th and 7th round picks that the Cardinals have. We should also remind everybody that they do not have any in the 4th or 5th round to kick off day 3 Saturday morning. That's because the Cardinals last year traded with the Baltimore Ravens to get up and draft cornerback Marco Wilson, and the trade to get tight end Zach Ertz with the Philadelphia Eagles last fall. However, it does help. They got that extra 3rd round pick they just used on MyJ Sanders from that trade with the Ravens, in which they also got wide receiver Hollywood Brown. Let's take a look at the picks the Cardinals do have tomorrow, round 6 and 7, day 3 of the 2022 NFL Draft. Reminder, you can watch that on NFL Network. We will also be streaming coverage. Round 6, they've got pick 201, which, fun fact, that was actually the pick head coach Cliff Kingsbury was selected when he was drafted.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so Tom Brady was 199, right? That's a famous one.
Seventh round, 244, and back-to-back picks, 256 and 257. Now, the good news, Paul, is that even though these are the later rounds, you might not expect an immediate plug-and-play rookie, this is still very helpful in terms of finding that depth for the Cardinals that you can still get in the later rounds of the draft.
No doubt about it. And I tell you what, it's happened before. You have found guys in the 6th and 7th round. Now, that's why you throw numbers at it. You know, hey, look, we're going to go with 5 picks between those 2 rounds, and you hope maybe you get one player. You get one player who would make your 53 and can be a regular going forward. But if nothing else, you can try some, especially some of these linemen in those later rounds. And I tell you, talking with the Drew Grigsons and talking with Quentin Harris and talking with Steve Keim, their board is filled with guys that they are targeting around 6 and 7 because, once again, it's just the sheer number of players in this year's draft. I also expect them to go into the major Power 5 conferences when you go into those rounds 6 and 7. A lot of those guys can get overlooked, but if you find guys that in the SEC, for example, a lot of big game experience, and they've gone and practiced against those blue chippers, 4 and 5 star recruits, a lot of times you go in and you see if you find those guys in round 6 and 7, and that can pay off down the line.
And we'll have more coverage coming up tomorrow. The draft kicks off 9 a.m. Pacific time. You can watch that on NFL Network. We will have coverage, an hour-long show for you, Bird City. We're going to start that just before the Cardinals have those back-to-back picks, 256 and 257 in the 7th round. So be sure to stay locked in on our social media so you have the updated time for when we're going to start those streams on the Cardinals Twitter account as well as the YouTube channel. And the best part is, those day 3 picks for the Cardinals are being announced from Mexico City, where the Cardinals play a game this season.
It's going to be a lot of fun, and don't be surprised if perhaps a running back is chosen, because now all of a sudden, to Paul's point, you're looking for maybe some skill, because special teams plays a factor now when you get into the later rounds, because that's where those players are going to make their mark first before you see them on offense or defense.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Running back. And we know that the NFL does not value running backs in the draft like they used to. And there's a lot of really good talented running backs that can fall to day 3. So I absolutely agree. And that is a need right now, just in terms of the depth chart and finding someone else, especially in training camp. You don't want to wear out, a James Conner. So you got to get numbers out there. You got to get bodies out there. So yeah, I would agree with that. Will Hernandez is in Mexico City. We connected with him at the draft party, so he is all fired up. Man, that was a scene. The energy in Mexico City, that was crazy. And can I just leave you with my favorite rookie quote? Trey McBride, when asked about an Arizona summer, asked if he's experienced one yet, said, and I quote, "Not yet. I've heard about them, though, and I'm excited to see it for myself."
Excited.
That's the kind of rookie enthusiasm that I love over the draft weekend. Trey McBride excited, quote unquote, for an Arizona summer.
Well, we are excited for more day 3 coverage Saturday morning, so make sure you join us. That'll do it for us tonight. Cardinals Draft Central for Paul Calvisi and Craig Grialou. I'm Dani Sureck. We'll see you right here tomorrow morning.